As a group, we were interested in learning about how moonshine has impacted the state of Kentucky, leading us to our research question: how has moonshine affected the state of Kentucky? The research question is important as it will help us gain a deeper understanding of the distilling industry, which began inside moonshine stills in early America's frontier of Appalachian Kentucky. Through our research, we have discovered that moonshine has had a long and lasting impact on the state of Kentucky culturally, economically, and socially. From early American distilling to prohibition to modern distilleries, the distilling industry has had a great economic impact on the state of Kentucky. Timothy Ellis from Elkhorn Distillery went as far as to say that distilling could be considered the backbone of Kentucky's economy due to its relationship with Kentucky taxes.
I would argue that it's like the bourbon industry is probably like the backbone of the Kentucky economy. We actually have the highest alcohol taxes of any state in the country, to my understanding. And I mean, that's in part because over 90% of the world's bourbon is produced here in Kentucky. So, I mean, if they're not taxing that, they're just missing out on a ton of money from their standpoint.
A case where Kentucky's deep economic tie with the distilling industry was evident was during America's Prohibition era.
According to the article titled Revisiting Prohibition, Prohibition affected all members of society and many people lost jobs and revenue due to the ban. Louisville alone lost between 6,000 to 8,000 distilling jobs, destroying many towns who relied on the distilling industry. The ban on alcohol did not only affect the workers who made alcohol, it also affected the people who voted for the ban. Congressman John Langley of Floyd County had to resign in 1926 due to alcohol-related offenses. Quote, "It affected people at all levels of society," end quote. Clotter said. Quote, "Some lost jobs and Kentucky tax revenues fell because of the lost business taxes, but others gained by going into business illegally," end quote. This shows how big the industry was in Kentucky and how much of a staple it is in the state. The map being shown is sourced by researchers at the University of Louisville Urban Studies Institute from the Kentucky Distillers Association, who they wrote a report for. The report written for the Kentucky Distillers Association, titled The Economic and Fiscal Impact of Distilling Industry in Kentucky, covers the economic impact of distilling across the state. The report ranged from the internal businesses as well as the statewide economical effect of the distilling industry. The map itself shows the locations of distilleries across the state. The distillery locations are also denoted by what type of member they are in the Kentucky Distillers Association. The map shows the extent to which distilleries are present throughout Kentucky. From seeing the extent to which distilleries are present throughout Kentucky, one can infer the deep economical ties which distilling has in Kentucky. Furthermore, one can connect the deep economical ties which distilling has to the early moonshine era, where distilling and alcohol became ingrained in Kentucky culture and its economy. Producing and selling moonshine became a profitable industry and business, leaving an early mark on Kentucky's economy that would continue to last and grow till this day. Arnold W. Carter had a few things to say about the economic contributions the distilling industry has made.
I think it has been a major contributor to the economics of Kentucky. As our economy has gone forward, it has had to rely upon the distillation industry for that matter.
Carter went on to comment on moonshine's economic impact on Kentucky.
Moonshine has had a similar impact in this regard. All bourbon starts by being moonshine.
In addition to its economical contribution, moonshine has helped create social change in regards to public opinion of alcohol. Despite being present from day one of Kentucky, alcohol was very controversial in the public's eyes. An example of the public's negative sentiment of alcohol was Devil John's violent campaign against moonshiners, as described by Timothy Ellis.
Here at Barrel House, we do produce our own moonshine. It's called Devil John Moonshine. It's named after a guy named John Wright, who was a moonshiner in eastern Kentucky in the late 1800s. And he got his name Devil John because his job was to kill moonshiners. He was getting paid to kill moonshiners, and they always said, if you get caught running moonshine, they'll send the devil after you, referring to John Wright. So he got this name Devil John,
The negative sentiment in regards to moonshine and spirits in general remained negative for some time, however, gradually shifted in the opposite direction. Carter discusses the shift in public opinion he has seen during his lifetime.
I think certainly the attitude within Kentucky has changed dramatically toward alcohol. When I was a young man, I noted just how, if you will, intolerant that our state had been. It's no surprise because Prohibition ended in 1934. I graduated from high school in 1966, only 32 years later, and there was still very much, this intolerance for alcohol and for alcoholism. But it has changed. It has softened as we've become more aware, and also I think how to manage, alcohol.
The photo of the mason jars of moonshine titled Kentucky Miss Moonshine becomes the 28th member of Kentucky Distillers Association shows the shift in public opinion of alcohol since the 1800s. In recent years, moonshine and alcohol in general has grown in popularity. The image makes it evident that moonshine is starting to be accepted by more people of Kentucky. Although Kentucky Miss Moonshine makes their moonshine legally, until recently even legal moonshine had been looked down upon by people outside the process of distilling. There has been a controversy and stigma around moonshine as many outsiders associated it with gangs, violence, and other unlawful acts. The fact that the Kentucky Distillers Association has accepted Kentucky Mist speaks volumes. It shows that moonshine is finally being accepted by people outside the Appalachian culture and is being looked at as another type of alcohol brewed by distillers who are no longer outlaws.
Kentucky Mist's recognition also shows how moonshine is being further embraced by Kentucky spirit companies at large. Both Carter and Ellis spoke on this point.
Alright, do you think moonshine has a place in the distilling industry?
Absolutely. Moonshine in and of itself is sought after by many of the people who visit us and go other places, especially in the South. Moonshine is regarded as a very nice drink.
If you think about moonshine today, most of what you're going to find is you're going to go into a liquor store and you're going to see Old Smoky moonshine, and it's a mason jar with a label on it with some fruit sitting in the bottom, that kind of thing. And it's a very commercialized product nowadays. Whereas, 150, 200 years ago, moonshine was this thing that was completely illegal, like people were doing kind of under the table.
Later in the interview, Ellis continued on the theme of the spirits industry shift in opinion in regards to moonshine.
There was a time where there were companies that were paying folks to kill moonshiners. That was in the late 1800s versus today we've got, it's a whole industry. Like Old Smoky, what they do is they make moonshine, and that's their whole industry. So, I'd say it's night and day from where it started to where it's at now.
Moonshine has produced a unique culture through its presence in the Appalachian Mountains.
Kentucky was founded on the stills of moonshiners. Upon finishing our interview with Mr. Arnold W. Carter of Town Branch Distillery, he discussed the corn patch and cabin rights, which was Kentucky's way of convincing people to move to the state when it was just forming by promising farmers hundreds of acres of farmland if they built a cabin or planted a corn patch. These farmers would bring their small stills and use leftover corn to make their moonshine, and this is how the illegal alcohol got its start in Kentucky. As it grew in popularity, moonshine produced a unique culture through its presence in the Appalachian area. The industry produced a culture particular to the men of the mountains, with a specific set of rules and values. According to the book titled Our Southern Highlanders, the mountain men were untouched by the culture of the rest of the world, leaving them to develop one of their own, as alcohol and distilling was so ingrained in their everyday lives. The image of men with rifles shows 8 moonshiners lying in wait in the woods for revenuers to protect their stills. Contextually, the illustration is from the cover of an issue from the Harper's Weekly magazine. Harper's Weekly was a political magazine that ran from 1857 till 1916. Harper's Weekly was made famous by its political cartoons and illustrations, as well as its extensive coverage of the American Civil War. During the Harper's Weekly's most influential period, it served as a form of outreach for the political cartoonist Thomas Nast, who often covered topics such as big government, corruption, and crime. The image demonstrates an aspect of mountain culture. Moreover, the image shows how fiercely defensive the men were of their way of life, and the beginning of a cultural divide between mountain people and outsiders. The image emphasizes how, from the early days of moonshine, there was a deep-rooted conflict between moonshiners and the rest of the public. This conflict paved the way for a cultural aspect of mountain men, which is distrust of outsiders, further showing how Kentucky's moonshine industry impacted the culture.
In conclusion, moonshine has had a long-standing history in the state of Kentucky and has benefited the state culturally, economically, and socially. Without the distilling industry, Kentucky would not be what it is today. Moonshine was once a very taboo subject, but has since become a very commercialized product that is sold at many distilleries today, and this is the legacy of what began in the backwoods of the Appalachian Mountains. Moonshine continues its legacy through the increased popularity of legal moonshine and the continued popularity and success of bourbon and other Kentucky distilled spirits.